right, well, let's go and take our Bibles and turn to Ephesians chapter number 4 this morning. Ephesians chapter 4. It's an exciting season for our church. If you missed last week, then you missed the announcement that 3 years ago we started a series of Bible studies with a group of men in the church to find the answer to a question. We looked through the New Testament and we asked, is the way that we do it consistent with the way that they do it? And that group of men all came to a consensus that there were some things that we need as a church. And so as a result of that study and having more meetings than I care to be a part of, how many of you guys would love if more meetings were just emails? Does anyone else feel like that? All right. If you need me to for a price, I'll send your boss a note about that, okay? But yeah, we had a ton of meetings to talk about this, and we discussed what it should look like and how do we get there. And what we came up with is a series of messages that we started last week, and we're calling it this. We're calling it very simply, this is what we need. This is what we need. Through this series of messages, our goal is that we as a church would discover what we need. But before we discover what we need as a church, we need to discover what we need as individuals first. And so next week I'll bring more clarity in regards to what we need as a church. But first we need to lay the groundwork. Last week we started that foundation by talking about some things we need. We need to know that we are gifted, right? And we talked about spiritual gifts and how God has created each of us in a very specific way with a specific gift that was to be used for the good of others and for the glory of God. And we gave you some homework. How many of you did your homework? All right, I see a few. Now, I'm going to give you a class excuse here because I told you that it was only 27 questions long. Did anyone get on there and realize there are more than 27 questions? I messed that up. There's 27 questions on the first page, all right? I think there's 5 pages, and so that's my fault. I apologize. I was not intentionally misleading you. And if you're like, you know what, Josh, that's going to take forever. I'm not sure if I have time for that. Let's be honest. You're going to watch more time in reels before the Bears game starts tonight than it would take to finish that spiritual gifts test, all right? So I want to encourage you to take the time to fill that out. It's something that'll help you because we need to know that we're gifted. But before we lay this next piece of the foundation, all this talk about spiritual gifts has gotten me thinking a little bit about Christmas. And so I brought some gifts that I got or received for Christmas, or gave for Christmas. The first one is this little calendar that we have given out for the last few years to some of our family members. It's got a calendar on one side for each month, and then it has different pictures on there so they don't forget who we are, you know, that kind of stuff. And so we gave those out. I have one that one actually sits on my desk. That's one that I received. That's one that I gave. I'm going to show you a gift that I received, and my wife makes fun of me for this, but I'm going to show you what it is anyway. I'm kind of excited about this. I got that right there. And I know a lot of you are like, do you do that much sweeping? No, I don't. I probably should do more of it. That is a big dustpan, but I use it for something more than that. We have multiple dogs, and I'm the one that's responsible for cleaning up the yard. And I don't know if you've ever picked up a scooper from a store, but the little thing is like this big. And it takes a lot of dumps. Sorry. Wow. So I did not mean that. I apologize. First service didn't get that, all right? It takes a lot of these, okay, to get it out. And so I wanted to do this. And so I got it. And some of you are like, you brought that into the church? I haven't used it yet. It just arrived from Amazon this week, so it is clean. But there's a very specific reason why I wanted to share these things with you, is because I feel like these gifts that God has given to us are a little bit similar to this. Like this gift is meant to be looked at. It's meant to be enjoyed. It's meant that when someone comes into your office, you can go, yeah, that's my daughter. Yeah, that's my son-in-law. You know, or whatever. You know, it's meant to be looked at, enjoyed. This one, it's meant to be what? Used. Yeah. And it's the same way with the gifts that God has given to us. You know, you may have taken that test, or maybe you didn't need to take the test because you knew the way that God has made you. You know the way that God has gifted you. And whether you know, if you do know your gift, it's important that we understand it's not so that we can just look at it and go, I'm gifted. God was good to me. He gave me the gift of mercy, or the gift of administration, or the gift of teaching, or the gift of prophecy, or whatever it may be. It's not just meant to be looked at. It's meant to be put into action. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at verses 7 through 16 of Ephesians 4. And we are going to see another thing that we need. Last week we saw that we need to understand that we are gifted. This week, it's very simple. We need equipped. We need to be equipped. Not only do we need to identify the gift that God has blessed us with, but we also need to learn how to use it. I've been privileged to teach 4 teenagers how to drive, and it is still up for debate on whether or not I was successful in doing that. But you know how it is when you get into a car. How many of you guys have ever had that privilege of teaching a teenager how to drive? By privilege, I use that term very loosely, all right? Maybe you got in a car with some of them, maybe one of them, and they didn't know how to do anything. They didn't know how to turn it on. They didn't know how to shift. They didn't know how to use a turn signal. Some of you still don't know how to use a turn signal. And you get in the car with them, you're like, where have you been all this time? Have you not been paying any attention at all? Like, when it comes to something like a gift like a car, imagine going back into the 1700s and giving them a car. They wouldn't even know what to do with it, right? It's an awesome gift. It's a great opportunity to have something like that. But I need to know how to use that thing, how to put it into work. So we're going to start in this passage and see how we are equipped, or how we put these gifts into action. And we're going to start near the end of the text we're looking at today, because at the end of it, it shows us the purpose. It shows us what results from putting our gift into action. And the reason I want to do that is because what happens when you put your gifts into action, it's amazing. And I want you to see from the beginning, like, yes, if that's what happens when I do that, then I want to be a part of it, right? And so let's see what he says in verse number 13. Verse 13, he's been talking about gifts a little bit up until this point. We'll get to that part in a minute. But in verse number 13, he says, till we all come in the unity of faith, in the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. This verse starts the list of things that happen when we are equipped and using our gift. The first thing that we see here is the unity of the faith. When I know my gift, and I'm actively using that gift in a meaningful way, it leads to the unity of the faith. What that means, throughout this passage, he's talking about the body of Christ. He's talking about the church, right? That's what he talked about in 1 Corinthians 12. That's what he talks about in Romans 12 when he talks about gifts. Always when he talks about gifts, it's always in the context of the body of Christ or the church. And so when we are using those gifts, it brings unity in the church. It helps us to connect to other believers in spiritually meaningful ways. As a matter of fact, whenever we're using our gifts, we know what they are, we're using them, it helps us to feel like we're a part of something. It brings unity. Look at the next one there. It says in verse 13, verse 13, and it brings knowledge of the Son of God. When we recognize our gift, we see it as being from Jesus. And when we're equipped to use it, we recognize it as being empowered by Jesus to be able to use it. And so naturally, the result of knowing your gift and using it by the power of the Spirit allows me to be able to know Jesus on a more personal level. Not only that, but he continues in that verse and he says, unto a perfect man. How many ladies got you one of those? A perfect man. That was your chance, ladies, all right? Not that you need, it's usually the guys that need brownie points. But when it talks about a perfect man here, he's talking about someone that is maturing, not someone who is free of mistakes or blemishes. It's just someone that's growing in their maturity. They're becoming all that God has designed them to be. So if I know my gift, I'm using my gift, then I start to realize, like, this is what I was made to do. This is what God has called me to. It's actually kind of a callback to verse number 1 when he told them, I beseech you that you would walk worthy of the vocation wherewith you are called. He's kind of calling back to the fact that we have a purpose and a calling from God. And when I'm using my gifts, it helps me to be more aware of that and to mature in my faith. And don't miss the clarifying statement that he gives after that. And he tells us what it looks like to be a mature or perfect man. He says, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. In other words, when I know the gift that God has given me, I'm using that gift by his power, then God's fullness in the person of Jesus Christ is seen on display in my life for others to see. So you have Christians united with other believers. You see them knowing Jesus, and you see them maturing in their faith and maturing in their walk with Jesus. He continues on. He says, there's even more to it. Verse 14 says, that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men, and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie and wait to deceive. In this verse, he's kind of giving them a warning. He'll dive deeper into this warning in chapter 6 when he talks about the armor of God. But what we see here is he talks about the wiles of the faith. As a matter of fact, when I think of wiles, I think of my favorite coyote that was on the Saturday morning cartoons when I was growing up. You guys remember Wile E. Coyote? Yeah, Wile E. Coyote, what was he always trying to do? He was trying to get the Roadrunner, right? And the way he tried to get the Roadrunner was he had to trick him. Setting up these traps, he's putting a rocket on his back, or he's dropping an Acme anvil off at the top of a cliff, the Roadrunner doesn't see, and Roadrunner always gets away from it. But what I'm trying to get you to see is the word wily is very similar to the word that's used here at the end of verse number 14, where it says lie in wait. That word lie in wait in chapter 6 is translated as the wiles of the devil. And so it's important for us to recognize that we do have an enemy. And the enemy is out to get us. But when I know my gift, and I'm using that gift by the power of God for the glory of God, it makes me less susceptible to the predator or the enemy that's out there. One person said in verse number 14 where it says that we henceforth be no more children, they said that when we're using our gift, it doesn't prolong our infancies. It doesn't make us live longer as spiritually immature babies because I'm maturing as God is working through me for others' good and for His glory. When you watch National Geographic, how many of you guys like watching National Geographic? Anybody enjoy that? You bunch of savages. You see a tiger going out there and just mauling some little baby animal, and you guys just raised your hand in church and said you enjoyed that stuff? Or, sorry, you walked right into that. I've enjoyed it too, right? But whenever you see those lions and those tigers, bears, oh my. When you see them go after, they don't go after the leader of the pack. They don't go after the strong one. Who do they go after? They go after the weak one. They go after the baby. They go after the one that is less mature. And he's telling us in this verse, in verse number 14, that when we begin to recognize our gift, we use those gifts, it helps us to mature to the place where we are less susceptible to some of these temptations. In verse number 15, he continues on and says, but speaking the truth in love, that we may grow up into Him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. One of the things that results from knowing our gift and using it is that we begin to speak the truth, but we do it with love. How many of you guys know someone that speaks the truth with unlove, or with no love? You guys know anybody that's like that? Or maybe they don't speak the truth without love, but they post the truth without love, right? And so he says, whenever we begin to recognize that I am gifted by God to bless others, it brings me to the point where I'm going to be a little bit more patient with them, where I'm going to be willing to help them understand, and I'm going to speak the truth in love to them. Like Jesus, we speak the truth in loving ways. We're following our head, our example, our leader, right? We grow up into Him and we become more like Jesus. And then in verse number 16, this is a mouthful. He says in verse 16, from whom the whole body fitly joined together and compacted by that which every joint supplieth, according to the effectual working in the measure of every part, maketh increase of the body unto the edifying of itself in love. What he's telling us in this verse is that from whom the whole body, the church is put together. When I read this verse and it's talking about being compacted in every joint supply, and I think about an elbow, or I think about a knee, I think about a hip, those joints that you got bone, and you got tendons, and you got muscles, and you got all that, but it's all put together in such a way by a miraculous creator so that works, when it's all working right, it's a beautiful thing, right? And he says that's the way the church is. The church is put together in such a way, and we are made to work together so that we can be effective and a blessing to others. Each person doing their part through these spiritual gifts. When that happens, we make increase of the body unto the edifying of itself in love. When every person is doing their part, it promotes growth in the body. It leads to the body building up itself in love. So the end result is the body is built up in love, and we're growing as a result from that love. So, we got a lot of these I want you to see because I just went through them. We went through them pretty quick. But look again at the purpose for the gifts that God gives us. Number one, we are connected to other believers. Number two, we know Jesus on a deeper level. Number three, we become more like Jesus. Number four, we know what we believe. We're not easily deceived. We have confidence. We speak the truth in love, and we receive the truth that's given to us in love. And we growth that results from that love. If you have the Holy Spirit of the living God inside of you because you have believed the gospel of Jesus Christ, there's probably something in you that looks at that and goes, That's what I need. That's what I need in my life. Is there something inside of you that's like longing to connect with others? Is there something inside of you that wants to know Jesus on a deeper level? Do you feel like there's more to life than you're experiencing now? Do you lack spiritual confidence or maybe find yourself confused? Do you struggle to either speak the truth or receive truth? Do you want to grow? Do you want to experience love on a new level? The answer is the gifts God gives us is that they are there to accomplish these very things. So, understanding that those are the results, or what walking in the Spirit, being, understanding our gift and using that gift, it results in these things in our lives. Let's look at the gifts. So let's go back to verse number 7 and look at these gifts that he's talking about. Verse number 7 says, "But unto every one of us we're given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ. Wherefore he saith," and when you see that in the New Testament, it's usually a quotation of the Old Testament. He's quoting Psalm 68 here. "When he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. Now that he ascended, what is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? He that descended is the same also that ascended up far above all heavens, that he might fill all things." There's a lot going on in those verses, and we could take several Sundays and walk through the doctrine that's in these verses, but we're not going to do that today. But I do want you to understand what he's talking about here. I believe what he's talking about is the time between when Jesus died on the cross and when Jesus rose from the dead, right? For those of you that are Bible scholars, you know that how much time passed between those two events. 3 days, right? So what happened during those 3 days after Jesus died on the cross? I believe these verses are speaking to that when it talks about him descending and ascending and those sorts of things. And there are good people that love Jesus and know their Bibles that disagree on what happened during those 3 days. Some people believe that during those 3 days, Jesus literally went to hell and suffered our hell for us during those 3 days. There's another group of people that say, well, no, he didn't go to hell, he went to Sheol, which could be described as paradise or Abraham's bosom. It was the place where Old Testament saints went until Jesus died on the cross so that then they could go to heaven. And Jesus went there for 3 days, and then when he rose, he took them with him to heaven. No matter where you fall doctrinally on what Jesus did during those 3 days, there's a lack of clarity, I guess, between God's people on that. But there is not a lack of clarity on what happened after Jesus rose from the dead. When he's talking here in verse number 8, where it says, "Wherefore he saith, when he ascended on high, he led captivity captive, and he gave gifts unto men." What he's alluding to here is a parade. How many of you guys are parade people? Like, you have a holiday, and you get up early when you could be sleeping in to go park somewhere, walk out and stand next to a bunch of strangers in hopes that you can pick up some candy off of the ground. How many of you guys are parade people? All right, yeah, I know I liked it when I was younger. I'm not so into it now. I'd rather do other things. But parades actually our parades are based off of the way that they used to do parades back in the day. Back in the day, what they would do is they would go off to war, and after they would win the war, the general and his leaders and his army would come back into town in this parade formation. And they would bring their prisoners of war and the spoils of war. And as they were making their way into town, just like we do, the people would gather, and they were not throwing out candy to the people, but they would throw out some of the spoils of war. And that's what Paul is referring to here, is that when Jesus rose from the dead, he won a victory. He conquered death. He conquered hell. He conquered the grave. And when he won that victory, he led captivity captive, right? And now he's coming in like a parade, and he's throwing out these gifts to us that we would know as these spiritual gifts. And so we're going to look and see what the spiritual gift is that he talks about in this passage. Now, like I said, there's different passages that talk about spiritual gifts, and this passage is only going to talk about a couple. But in verse number 11, you see what the spiritual gift is that he's referring to here. He gave some apostles, he gave some prophets, he gave some evangelists, and he gave some pastors and teachers. So the spiritual gift that he's talking about in this passage yeah. Thank you. Tell my wife. No, That's what he's referring to. He's talking about pastors. He's talking about spiritual leaders in our lives as being gifts from God. Now, if you follow the line of reasoning through this chapter, and we won't take time to read all of it today, but this chapter is all about being made new. And it's being made new in the process of community. Being made new does not take place in isolation. It takes place in community. I want you to look at the person next to you and tell them, you need help, man. You need help. Go ahead and tell them. They know it. And they know you do too. We all need help. And this whole passage is about that. Verses 1 through 3, it's all about how we are made new in relationships. Verses 4 through 6 is a reminder that we as believers are part of a body. And now in verses 7 through 11, he tells this body of believers that have been made new in relationships, guys have been given a gift known as spiritual leaders. And these leaders aren't going to lead in the way that leaders back in their day would lead, with an iron fist and, bossing everybody around, and like they sat on a throne while people were, waving palm leaves, fig leaves, whatever, wave fan like they see on the old movies and stuff. No, they lead with a very specific purpose. As a matter of fact, in the next verse, he's going to give an instruction manual to spiritual leaders. I know a lot of you men don't know what an instruction manual is. I know some of you. How many guys are the kind of person you look at it, you wad it up and throw it away? And then you go back and pull it out of the trash a few minutes later, right? You're trying to put something together. We got an instruction manual in verse number 12. Here's why he gave spiritual leaders: for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, and for the edifying of the body of Christ. When it talks about perfecting, that word perfecting just simply means equipping. He gave spiritual leaders to equip us. He gave spiritual leaders to train us. The word literally means to put a thing into the condition in which it ought to be. Our very first youth pastor that we hired here, his name is Jeremy Vance, and some of you may remember Jeremy. And you may remember this happening in this room. We were having a Sunday afternoon service, and Pastor Jeremy was speaking, and I think he was about right here. And Jeremy went to illustrate something, and he did this with his hands. And when he did, he goes, "Oh!" And I honestly thought he was having a heart attack because he grabbed it, and he's, "Oh!" And he goes, "Josh, you're going to have to take over." And just walked right out that door back there. I was like, what is going on? So I got up and tried to take over from there. Well, what had happened is he had a trick shoulder. Is that what you call it? A jacked up shoulder. That's what he had, right? A shoulder that didn't work very well. And when he went like this, his shoulder came out of joint. And Wendy Mitchell was here, and Wendy has some experience in the medical field. And so Wendy followed him out, and Wendy went back there, and I don't know if she punched him or pulled his arm or told him to suck it up, Buttercup, or what, but she got it back in place, right? He came back in and he finished the message. But what Wendy did when she went out there is she, this verse, what is the word that's used there? She perfected him. She equipped him. She put his shoulder back into a place where it could be usable. Spiritual leaders are to equip us so that we can do what God has made us to do. And notice in the rest of the verse, he tells us what that is. To equip us to do what? In verse number 12, to do the work of the ministry and to edify the body of Christ, or build up the body of Christ. Now, some people would say that those three things that are listed in verse number 12 are actually descriptive of the pastors. Pastors perfect others or help them be equipped. Pastors do the work of the ministry, and pastors edify the body, which would be true. We do those three things. But I would contend that what it's saying is that pastors are perfecting the saints so the saints can do the work of the ministry, so the saints can edify one another. And the reason I say that is because in the context of Ephesians chapter 4, he's talking about how they are all one body, how they all have these different parts, but they're all working together just like those ligaments and those tendons and those muscles and everything else. And so if this is talking about the pastors are supposed to be the ones doing all the ministry, or the pastors are supposed to be the ones doing all the edifying, then why did he give us all the gifts? I would contend that he's pointing out that the responsibility of pastors is to equip the saints so the saints can do the work of the ministry, and so the saints can edify one another or the body of Christ. And this is where a lot of churches have a disconnect. there's a belief in the modern church that spiritual leaders are God's gift to the church so the spiritual leaders can do the work of the ministry. The spiritual leader is often expected to meet all of the needs of all of the people. And many church members believe that, and so they think their only responsibility is to just simply attend church and encourage the pastor as he does the work of the ministry. What do you think is the average size of churches in America? Tell the person next to you what you think it is. Ready? Think of one. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Tell them. The average size of churches in America, 65. Now, I am not in any way, shape, or form knocking smaller churches. It is because of smaller churches that I am here today. It was smaller churches that invested into my life and into my family's life, and I will be eternally grateful to them. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because the average, unfortunately, many churches think that the pastor is the one that is supposed to be doing all of the ministry. He's the one that's supposed to be doing all of the edifying. And here's the thing, a pastor can only do so much. One guy can only do so much. A pastor, they say an average pastor can meet the spiritual needs of about 75 to 100 people. They say a high-energy pastor can relate to about 150 people before he has a nervous breakdown. And a high-energy pastor that has OCD and is willing to work 90 hours a week, he is able to reach about 200 people. But not only do these kinds of pastors ruin themselves by running themselves into the ground, but they typically also lose their families. I think the more important thing to recognize, though, in the context of this passage, is that when a church and the church's leadership believe that the ministry is to be done by the spiritual leaders alone, I love this truth. It robs God's people of the very opportunities that He designed to transform their lives. We read it in verses 13 through 16. We just finished verse number 12 where he's like, here's the responsibility. Teach them how to use their gifts. Equip them to use their gifts to do the work of the ministry. Teach them so they will edify one another. And then once they do that, verses 13 through 16, and that's where he hit them with, they'll be connected to one another. They'll know Jesus on a deeper level. They'll become more like Jesus. They'll know what they believe and why they believe it. They'll speak the truth in love. Growth will come as a result of that love. These things do not result from coming to church. These things result from being the church. I am not going to grow in my knowledge of God just by coming and watching someone else serve. God has equipped us in such a way with a spiritual gift so that we can use that gift, and as we're using it, as we're learning how He has made us and learning how He wants to work through us, it helps us grow in those 6 areas that we see listed in verses 13 through 16. Some of you probably remember Pete Rose. Anybody remember Pete Rose? Greatest hitter of all time. I think he's got more hits than anyone else ever. He's not in the Hall of Fame because he also liked to hit the gambling hall a little bit, right? But Pete Rose, when he was getting older, I saw a video where he was not only the manager, now that he was a little older, but he was also a player. And so there was a time where they would be in a situation where they needed a hit, and he was like, ain't nobody on this team can hit like I do. I got more hits than everybody else, so guess what he did? Put himself in, right? The manager put himself in, gets the hit, and when he gets on base, he's like, I'm too old for this running stuff. So he had somebody pinch run for him, and he went and sat on the bench. Now, how many of you guys have seen that recently in Major League Baseball? I know you don't see it in basketball because the short white guy ain't going to sub himself in, right? The coach. You don't see it in baseball. You don't see it in basketball. You don't see it in football. But you see it in churches. You see it in churches where either a pastor takes that responsibility upon himself to do everything, or the church puts that responsibility upon the pastoral staff to do all of those things as well. This is not typical, it is not expected, nor is it wise. It is a problem because there's only so much that a person can do. There are only so many things that a person is gifted to do. There's only so much time that a person can do those things. This last week, we had our food pantry on Tuesday, and we were able to serve 67 families in our community. On the way out, I think that's worth celebrating. On the way out, a couple of the ladies that were working said, hey, thanks for help. And I think they were just, saying it just to be kind. And I was like, I didn't do anything. I sat in my office and took care of other stuff, right? But The reason that 67 families were able to be served was because we had a host of people that came early, that drove to pick up the stuff, that separated everything, that distributed things, that prayed with the people as they came through, that cleaned up afterwards. Look, if it was just me out there doing it, or me, Andrew, and Spencer doing it, not only would it not be done as effectively, but also our church would suffer for it because there would be other things that need to be taken care of that would not have been taken care of. But the reason we were able to minister and able to continue on was because some people saw their gift and found a place to use it. There's something supernatural that God does in our lives when we begin to understand that life is not about us. When we identify our gift, when we are equipped to use it and begin to use it, verses 13 through 16 tell us what we can expect. I believe that God has uniquely equipped every person in this room. Some of you are ministers that are disguised as teachers. Some of you are ministers that are disguised as delivery drivers. Some of you are ministers that are described as salesmen. But don't miss this. All of us are ministers. It's not Pastor Andrew, myself, and Spencer are the ministers at Grace. No, every one of us are members. And our job is to help us realize that, to identify our giftings, and then find ways to use them to edify and build up others, to minister to others. Next to verse number 11 in my Bible, I have written, think personal trainer, not masseuse. Is that what I have? Massage therapist. Same thing. I have never gotten a massage in my life until my wife and I went to Costa Maya, Mexico on a cruise. And you get off the ship and they've got tons of places on the beach where you can go, but they also had tons of these massage therapists, masseuses, whatever you call them. And you can get like a 30-minute massage for like $15. And so my wife was like, babe, we should get a couple's massage. And I was like, babe, that's going to cost like $30, right? Which if you've ever had a massage, you know they're not cheap, but out there they are. And I had never had one before then, never had one since then, but it was quite the experience, you know. When we think about a massage therapist, they're there to just make you feel better, you know. They're there to get the kinks out. How many guys could use a good massage right now? Someone get the kinks out, you know. They're there to just make you feel better. But when we see this gift in verse number 11, this is not someone that is given to just make us feel better about ourselves so we can go out and conquer the weak. Think personal trainer. How many of you guys have ever had a personal trainer before? Yeah, they're not nice. Remember Biggest Loser? The trainers were the meanest people on the show, right? But they were the ones that were the most invested in trying to help those people to be successful, to help them to realize who they were, where they were headed, where they needed to get to. My job is to help us, not as a masseuse to make you feel better when you walk out, but to speak the truth in love and to try to encourage and motivate you to know your gift and to use it. I'm going to say something that might come across wrong, and if it does, I don't apologize, but I hope that you'll understand where we're coming from. The message of our text is that it is not my responsibility to pastor every person in this church. It is my responsibility to make sure that every person gets pastored and spiritual needs get met. And I cannot do that alone. Andrew, myself, and Spencer cannot do it alone. This body of believers was not designed for us to do it alone. Last week we had our Expies, Brazilian steakhouse. We decked it out. We had this whole place, all these chairs out and had tables and all the fancy silverware that broke when you're trying to use it because it was plastic. But it looked nice. I don't have any pictures of the meat on the skewers, but I got a picture of these really good-looking servers that helped get all that meat out. We had a great time at our Brazilian steakhouse last week, and I didn't get the exact number, but I think we have around 150 people in our church that minister in some capacity within our calendars here at the church. And what I want you to know, and I think this is the heart of this passage, is that the people that minister in those 150 capacities, they are the reason that we are able to do what we do on Sundays. They are the reason that families are being reached. They are the reason that marriages are being healed. They are the reason people are growing in small groups. They are the reason that this place is full of kids, teenagers, and 20-somethings on Wednesdays that want to learn about Jesus. They are the reason that we play a part in getting the gospel to this world through over 30 different missionaries. They are the reason that we are here. And quite frankly, there's no reason why every person under the sound of my voice has not identified their gift and asked God to show them how to use it to serve Him by serving others. You might say, Josh, I feel like you're kind of calling us out. My desire is not to call anyone out. My goal is to call you up. Remember what we started with in verses 13 through 16? In case you forgot, here's what they were. When we do this, when you identify your gift and you let us help you find a place to use it, it helps you connect to other believers. You feel like you're a part of something. It helps you to know Jesus on a deeper level. It helps you to become more like Jesus. It helps you to know what you believe. You're not easily deceived. You have confidence. It helps you speak the truth in love. It helps you to receive truth from others. And it helps us to see growth that results from that love. I don't want to call anyone out today, but I do want to call you up to something, because this is what we were made for. So where do we go from here? On the way out today, we've got a handout. There's a picture of the handout that we'll share with you. On the front of that handout, it has some immediate ministry needs. We have some areas that, quite frankly, how many of you guys have ever had a knee start to hurt? Yeah, I figure it'd be a few. A knee starts to hurt, so you start walking different, and then your other knee starts hurting. Anyone ever had that happen before? And why'd that other knee start hurting? Because it was having to work harder because the other one wasn't doing its job. And quite frankly, we've got some people in our church that are doing a lot of things because there's some people that haven't stepped up to do the job that God made them to do. And so we have some immediate needs that need to be filled. And so that's on one side of the paper, and it's broken down into the different giftings. So if you find out your gift, you can look on there and you can see, oh, I can use my gift here or there. On the back side are a lot of the other things that, the other ministry opportunities that we have available. But here's the thing. We can't equip you if you don't want to be equipped. You've got to make the first step, right? And so the first step is to find out what your spiritual gift is. You may already know what it is. You don't have to take a test to find out what it is, but that is available. The QR code's at the bottom of the paper. And then after you identify your spiritual gift, I want to encourage you, number 2, to review the ministry opportunities that are listed on these papers. Number 3, fill out a ministry interest form. It is on a QR code at the bottom of the paper. You just scan it with your phone. If you don't know how to do that, then Pastor Andrew or Spencer can help you with that. But just fill out a ministry interest form, which will basically ask you for your contact information, and then just tell us what you feel like you are interested in doing or what you feel like your spiritual gift is. And then after that, Pastor Andrew will contact you to set up probably a 10 or 15-minute phone call or a 10 or 15-minute time in his office to just walk through how we can come alongside of you and help you use the gift that God has blessed you with. We are not asking anyone to volunteer. We're asking you to minister. Because ultimately, just like the title of this sermon series, this is what we need. Let's pray together.